Welcome to Luso History. Today we will travel back in time to the 16th century, a time of expansion and discovery for Europeans, and especially for Portugal. During this period, the Portuguese were in a real race to open trade routes in the east, driven by a tireless desire to reach the valuable markets for spices and exotic products in India and Southeast Asia. After Vasco da Gama's arrival in Calicut in 1498, the world of navigation was transformed within a few years. The Portuguese established trading posts at strategic points along the Indian coast, seeking to control the trade in highly valued products such as pepper, cotton, and even precious stones. Among these points was Machilipatnam, a port city that would become one of the most significant Portuguese outposts. But why Machilipatnam? Why did you choose this city, located on the Bay of Bengal? Machilipatnam had a privileged geographical position, located at the mouth of a river. The city had easy access to the ocean, and a natural port that facilitated the transit of large ships. Not only that, Machilipatnam was connected to trade networks that crisscrossed Asia, extending as far as the Middle East and China. For the Portuguese, it was the perfect place to set up a base and expand their trade with the Eastern world. After establishing Machilipatnam as an entrepôt, the Portuguese quickly began to organize trade in the region. The city soon grew into a bustling commercial center, attracting traders and merchants from all parts of the East. Persians, Arabs, Chinese, and even merchants from Southeast Asia came to Machilipatnam. Here they bought and sold a variety of goods, with the Portuguese acting as intermediaries. Cotton was one of the most important products, especially the fine and colorful fabrics produced by the local community in Europe. There was a great demand for these fabrics, which were light, fresh, and with detailed designs that enchanted the European nobility. Furthermore, spices, such as pepper, which was already known as black gold, were also part of commercial exchanges. Spices from Machilipatnam were transported to Lisbon and distributed throughout Europe, where they were used not only as a condiment, but also as a preservative and even medicine. The Portuguese also traded in precious stones and pearls coming from Indian waters. These items were taken to Europe and sold at high prices, consolidating Portugal's role as the great European warehouse in the East. Machilipatnam, with its busy port, was one of the gateways for Asian trade to the West. Over time, the Portuguese presence began to leave its mark on the cultural life of Machilipatnam. Trade brought a constant flow of ideas, and the Portuguese began to introduce their traditions and culture to the city. For example, Christianity came to Machilipatnam through Portuguese missionaries, who established some of the first churches in the region. Many of these churches were built in the European style, with arches, towers, and stained glass windows that stood out in the city's landscape. Local architecture also began to display Portuguese features. Small details like arches and windows showcase a unique blend of Indian and European styles, creating an architectural style not seen in other regions of India. In the streets, a mixture of languages could be heard. Portuguese words began to infiltrate the local vocabulary, especially to describe products or concepts brought by Europeans. This cultural mix went beyond architecture and religion. Even the cuisine was influenced by Portuguese influences. Some typical dishes from the Indian coast began to incorporate Portuguese ingredients or preparation methods, such as the use of vinegar or the technique of marinating fish in spices. Thus, the Portuguese presence in Machilipatnam was not limited to trade. It influenced several aspects of the city's daily life. Machilipatnam's privileged position and commercial success naturally attracted the attention of other European powers. Around the 17th century, the Portuguese began to face fierce competition from the Dutch, English, and French. These rivals were willing to use any means necessary to take control of the colony and the region's lucrative trade and $1,000 In 605, the Dutch captured Machilipatnam, but allowed the Portuguese to continue operating on a limited basis. However, Portuguese influence began to decline as the Dutch imposed several restrictions on their operations. Then came the English, who established the powerful East India Company, further expanding competition. This was the beginning of the decline of Portuguese control in Machilipatnam, and they were unable to compete with the military and economic power of these new powers. Despite this, the Portuguese impact remained visible, as they had left a deep mark on the city and its commercial traditions by the end of the 17th century. The Portuguese had already lost much of their influence in Machilipatnam, especially with the advance of British rule. The trade changed hands, but the cultural traits and the Portuguese community that had formed over the years continued to exist. Although Portuguese trade weakened, the Christianity planted by the missionaries and the cultural heritage left roots. The Portuguese language has also left traces, especially in some local dialects, and many families still maintain traditions that have been passed down for generations, including festivities and religious. Machilipatnam's Portuguese heritage is a reminder of how trade can go beyond economic exchanges and become a profound cultural exchange, forever changing the city's identity. The history of Machilipatnam is a reflection of the era of navigation and the European search for a commercial empire in the East. This city, which began as a Portuguese outpost, became a cultural, economic, and religious meeting point, with influences that remain to this day. More than a dot on the map, Machilipatnam was one of the first links that connected the West and the East. Its trade routes helped shape global trade and build bridges between cultures. This is a story of influence, exchange, and a lasting legacy. Which part of this story did you find most interesting? Leave your comment below. The true wealth of a nation resides in its cultural heritage. Gandhi reminds us that cultural exchange goes beyond trade. It deeply enriches the nations involved, as occurred between Portugal and India through colonies like Machilipatnam.